What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Knives at the Round Table. My name is Marco, and today we're going to be talking about the Medford knife and tool Micro Praetorian. And this was my introduction to Medford knives. And in fact, if you watch, I have a brand overview of Medford knife and tool. This is one of two knives that I would recommend that you start out if you want to try out Medford knives. This is one of the knives that I would recommend you start with, because it gives you a taste of what Medford knife and tool knives are, and without going full, hardcore Medford. And because full on hardcore Medford, it's pretty intense. Okay, so let me give you a tour of the knife and then we get started. So this one, it's, as you can see, is Medford knife and tool, and then it's got an S. Medford likes to put a little code. Instead of telling you what the steel is, he puts a code. The S means S35VN. Okay, that's serial number, serialized parts. So what you got here is a drop point blade. This knife comes in a tanto blade. Most of Medford knives come in a drop point or a tanto blade. This one is sub 3 inches, as Nick Shabazz would say uncontroversially, sub 3 inches. So it's a smaller knife, but it feels a lot more. It kind of bats above its weight class. What you have here is a titanium frame lock. They do not have a lock bar insert. There's just a carbonized face, and it doesn't have an over travel stop, other than the fact that the clip, because it's an oversized clip, it kind of stops or prevents a little bit of the over travel of the lock bar. You've got external stop pins that come into these into this groove right here, this notch. You've got huge, very aggressive jimping here, and you've got a glass breaker in the back. They make them in all kinds of anodizing, bronze, black, PVD coated blades, galaxy flamed, all kinds of hardwood combination. This is the one that I got. I've had this one for a while. As you can see, I've put my own edge on it, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit when we talk about cutting. Now, this is the Micro Praetorian, and is there aren't very many knives in the Medford knife and tool lineup that are smaller than this one. You can think of the Ares that has been discontinued, or the Der Hund is smaller. The Smooth Criminal is kind of this size. I no longer have mine, but I'll show you some size comparisons here so you can get an idea of the size. That is the Paramilitary 2, and this is the Para 3. So as you can see, it's kind of a smaller knife, even though it's kind of a chunky one, right? It's tall, it's fat. I'll show you here the thickness. That's your Para 3, and that is the Micro Praetorian. So as you can see, because the blade is so thick, you end up with a fairly thick knife. So you can see the difference in blade thickness. It's the Medford knives are generally known for having very, very thick blades. Here it is against the Benchmade bug out. That's a mini bug out, and this is the full size bug out. So as you can see, lengthwise, it's very much in the vicinity of the mini bug out, but it's kind of much more massive in every other dimension. Thickness of the blade, thickness overall, how tall it is, how it carries in the pocket. The mini bug out kind of disappears in your pocket, right? It's one of those knives you can carry when you're wearing shorts. You cannot wear the Micro Praetorian when you're wearing shorts unless you no longer want to be wearing them. So that's kind of how it feels in the pocket. Now, I've had this one for a while, and let me talk action first. So for the most part, other than few exceptions like the Smooth Criminal, Medford knives are not, in my opinion, they don't have good fidgety action. Okay, it's very smooth. It's kind of in the neighborhood of what the Sabenza feels like. You know, it's phosphor bronze washers. It's very smooth. It does feel premium, but it's not fast. You can deploy them, you know, with a lot of wrist, but you know, reverse flicking them, it's hard to do. They're heavy blades. They're very tight, and because it's got proprietary hardware, you can't adjust the you know the fit, or you can't tune it really. So the action, it feels very secure. Okay, it feels premium, but it's just not fast, right? You can deploy it with a lot of wrist, or you can slow roll it out, but you can't fidget with these knives, not really. Like I said, the blade, it's a hunk of a blade, so it's hard to to deploy, and it's very tight. It's phosphor bronze washers. There and the lock bar tension is also fairly strong, so they're not known for. Some of them do have drop shot actions. As you can see that with a little bit of help, but as soon as I release when I'm pushing it against the lock bar, it can drop like that. But as soon as I let it go, it takes a lot of shaking to try and get it to close, and that's because the lock bar tension is very strong. So action, like I said, it feels very smooth. It's more of a kind of a heavier duty type of knife, but it's not a fidgety by any stretch of the imagination. It's nowhere close to being some of the top actions that I've seen. And it's not just that it's phosphor bronze washers, right? Like if you like the Rockstead Higo X that I reviewed, or even some of my Spydercos, they're running on phosphor bronze washers, like the Pair 2, right? Phosphor bronze washers, look at that, drop shut. You don't get that here. Okay, you're nowhere. Like I said, it does feel premium. It is very hydraulic, but it's not fidgety at all. Now, cutting, these are kind of a heavier duty knife, and they are far from being the sliciest knives in the world. This one comes, in Medford, they hand grind their blades, and you can tell that they hand grind their blades because you see the grind lines. They're always perpendicular to the cutting edge, right? The grind lines kind of move in that direction, right? You don't get that when it's machine ground, because in the machine they just go in one single direction. They don't have a hand that kind of rotates the knife. So they're hand ground. This one's a hollow grind, and it's really nice hollow grind. I like the grind lines quite a bit. Let me see if I can show you. Yeah, let me do it slowly. Yeah, it's really nice grind lines. I like the Medford grind lines. I like them quite a bit. It's one of the things that I like the most about these knives. But they have very, very thick blades. Okay, so they're heavier duty blades, where you can do a lot of work with them. It's just they're not slicey, right? I mean, if you take a look at the thickness of what the mini bug out is, I mean, it's probably 3, maybe 4 times as thick. Very, very thick. So they're, whenever you're trying to do cutting through a cardboard box, or slicing through an apple, or any of those kinds of things, this is not the knife for you. Shallower cuts, cutting something on a board, maybe. Even then, it doesn't come to the thinnest of edges, even with the hollow grind. The as you can look, I'll show you here. The plunge grind here, which is, it's still, they didn't quite get to the edge of it, but you can tell, how thick the edge is by looking at that area, right? It's not the thinnest edge in the world. So even though I've put a mirror edge on it and it's really, really, really sharp, as soon as it gets behind the edge, it becomes a fairly thick blade, and by the time you get to the full thickness of the blade, it's just a really, really thick blade. So I would call the most Medford knives and the micro Praetorian in particular, I would call them heavy-duty cutting tools, just not very good slicers. Okay, they're just too thick. They're just too thick for anything like that. Ergonomics. I think ergonomics is where it's one of the biggest drawbacks of Medford knives in general. There's exceptions. I think that the Smooth Criminal is one exception, but for the most part, I've had this one. I had the Midi Marauder, the Slim Midi, the Praetorian Genesis, and the Micro Praetorian, and the Eris, and all of them are pretty dreadful ergonomically. The jimping is really, really rough. Okay, you put any amount of pressure in it, and it'll hurt your fingers. The transition between the flat portion of the scale, this face, and this one is too close to a 90. You feel like you're holding a 2x4, like a squarish block of thing. There's no molded, there's no rounding, there's no anything like that. The ergonomics are pretty bad. And the lock bar axis, it's very easy to access the lock bar, but it protrudes so much from this scale, and this little edge is so thin that when you're holding onto it right here, that you feel it quite a bit. Okay, so I think that the Medford knives, it hotspots galore. Okay, you feel it everywhere. I feel it here. I feel the clip. I feel every edge here. I feel the jumping. Ergonomically, this is not the knife. It's I call it a heavy-duty knife because of its thickness of blade and its materials and its construction. But in all honesty, unless you've got very comfortable gloves, this is not a knife that I would take out when I have to do some serious work. When I have to really hold on to my knife and really put some force behind it. This is not the knife. It'll look at my hand. I mean, just from holding it during the review, you can see all the lines of me holding it. Ergonomically, it's just not there. There's something missing in the ergonomic design of this knife. Maybe it's just a gloves only type of knife, but I don't usually wear gloves when I'm carrying this knife. So ergonomics are amongst the worst for a pocket knife that I've ever held. For the most part, that's a problem with Medford knives. Now, fit and finish, the ergonomics and the design, that's one thing, but the vision that they have, the vision that Greg Medford has, is executed very well. Okay, these are robust blades. These are heavy duty blades. They are well made. The action feels, like I said, it feels premium. It's not fast. It's not fidgety. It's not drop shutty or anything like that. Especially not. And I've had this for about 2.5 years, so it's not like, you can see it's been sharpened and stuff, and you can see all the marks of me carrying it. So it's been used, but you still don't get I have a Savenza 25 that is on phosphor bronze washers, and it's much buttery smooth than this. But the fit and finish, for what they're doing, is very good. The grind lines are excellent. You get, it's perfectly symmetrical, even though they do it by hand. You got this fuller groove, the stone wash on it, the all of it, I think is very well done. The fit and finish, I think, is good. I think there's some designs in the flaw, or some flaws. Oh, some designs in the flaws. Some flaws in the design. I think there's some flaws in the design, but I think what they did design, they've executed with a fair degree of quality. I think they're well built tools, even if there's some drawbacks to them. Airing of grievances. This there's a couple, and I will always start with the fact that these are proprietary pivots. Now, Greg Medford has stated that he does these type of pivots to try and stay ahead of Chinese knockoffs, okay, to stay ahead of fakes, and he changes the hardware constantly. The problem with that thought is that I don't know whether that's the right hardware, because if he keeps changing it, how do I know which one is the right Medford hardware? You know, there's it doesn't work. Even sometimes he does 5 dots, 6 dots, 8 dots, whatever, 4 dots around the pivot, and all that confuses people, right? Because there's going to be a micro Praetorian with this hardware, and there's going to be another Praetorian with a different hardware, both of which are original, and it doesn't help the consumer find out which ones are fake and which ones are original. Maybe it helps Greg Medford, right? If he says, well, this serial number goes with whatever hardware, maybe him, but from a consumer standpoint, it doesn't really help. And he doesn't give you the tool, so you cannot disassemble and tune and maintain and clean any of this. Yes, you can send it into Greg Medford, right, who really, in today's day and age, who likes to use the post office where many knives get lost, send it in, wait for 3 days to be delivered to Greg, maybe a week or two while they tune it up, and then another 3 days. Nobody wants to be without their knives 3-4 weeks at a time. So you can't disassemble it. The ergonomics are dreadful. It's a heavy duty knife, but I actually carry it when it's a light duty day for me, when I'm not expecting to do a lot with my knife, just because the ergonomics are pretty darn bad. Now, and they don't have some stuff that the industry is become standard, right? A lock bar insert on the face here. Even people like John Grimsmore, right? The Norseman didn't have a lock bar insert forever, and I want to say that maybe a year ago or two, they're like, well, we really should have been using a lock bar insert all along, because that's better than a carbonized face. I think at this level of knife and the price of these knives, they should include a lock bar insert. And I will say this again, I've said it many times. Every time I do a Medford knife, I own about 4 or 5 of the knives, but I think they're horrific value. I think for what you get a S35VN titanium frame lock with not very good ergonomics. You can't disassemble it, and they're tremendously expensive. I think for the price, if you're at a point in your collection where you have many other knives and you like the aesthetic, by all means, I've done it. I don't recommend that this is where you start, but for the price, this is much more expensive than a Sabenza or an XM18. Those are much better choices, in my opinion, than what this one is. Now, they have very unique aesthetic, they have a very unique design, and I do like them. I just don't think that the value is there for these knives. Well, guys, hopefully this has been helpful. If it is, then like and subscribe only if you think I earned it. And until I see you at the next one, take care.